I am going to be just touching basics on auto insurance. How many of you here know what your auto limits are? What's your limits on your insurance? Anybody know?
I don't know, what's the minimum of whatever you need?
Okay. State minimum is 25,000 / 50,000. So if you have 250, 500, I mean,
Well, I just was thinking
You're
those
guessing.
numbers, it's probably 25, 50.
how many could produce an insurance card out of their vehicle if they were asked? Gosh, you're always supposed to carry it in your vehicle. Now, does everybody? Not always. A lot of times you get it in the mail and you just throw it in on a file and call it that. So I know you just had insurance discussed, and we're just going to review a few things and open up for questions. Most policies come 100, 300 / 100. That's liability. The first 100, if you are at fault in an accident, liability is always determined if you are at fault. That's what liability covers. The first 100,000, on this policy we're going to say, if you go through a stop sign, you hit a van. 4 people are seriously injured. And by the way, I am going to give you some handouts that's going to kind of recap this. So 4 people are injured, and let's say all 4 have $100,000 worth of medical bills. And it's not unusual, especially with today's medical cost. We're saying your insurance company is going to pay $100,000 per person for medical injuries. That sounds great. All right, so far so good. But the $300,000 is the max we're going to pay for one accident. So you get an accident and you're at fault, and we have 4 people that get hurt, and there's $400,000 worth of medical costs. You have to come up with that $100,000. So it's vital that you make sure you have high enough liability limits. Now, granted, 4 people in a vehicle, it may, that may not happen, but you don't want to worry about the what ifs. If someone is killed in an automobile accident, generally the $100,000 just automatically paid out if you're at fault. This $100,000 is for the property. You hit the van hits a sign, the sign falls into a building. All that damage is paid out of this $100,000. The $5,000 is called MedPay. The medical payment covers the people in your vehicle. So you're in an accident, if you're at fault, you run a stop sign, hit a post, whatever, somebody gets a laceration on their forehead, their shoulders bunged up. That $5,000 is going to go to help pay for them. That's per person. If you have a van full of people, they all get injuries, we're going to pay max of $5,000 for the people in your van. Now, if you're not at fault and somebody gets an accident, they hit you and you're injured, this is where their policy is going to pay for your lost wages, you can't work, you can't, or you got medical bills. That's what that's going to come out of. The $250 generally is a deductible. It's comprehensive. Comprehensive covers things you cannot control. Wind, fire, theft, glass coverage. You hit a deer, you hit a pheasant. That's comprehensive. That you can't control that. The $500 is collision. And generally you're going to see a collision deductible is going to be a little bit higher because the general rule of thumb is if you are operating a vehicle, it's your vehicle, you're going to try not to hit something. So you carry a little higher deductible. The $250, you can't control the deer coming out of the ditch. So that's going to come under the $250. The $100, $300, underinsured and uninsured. It is state law that you have to have insurance. Not everybody does. So, you get an accident, it's not your fault, somebody hits you but they don't have insurance, this is where you're going to get your medical payments paid out. Then what happens is, let's say you have Allied insurance. You get an accident, it's not your fault, you have injuries, you go to the hospital, Allied is going to pay for it. Allied will then go after the other party and try to get the money out of them. Maybe they have insurance, but it's not enough. Maybe they have state minimums, $25,000, and you have $50,000 worth of medical. That individual is going to have to come up with the rest. Now, granted, if they can't afford insurance, they probably don't have a lot of money. So it's important to know where your liability limits are at. Not a lot of people know that. Do not carry the state minimums. I personally have $250,000 of liability / 500. I mean, it's not that much more. It costs very little to increase your liability limits. But it's very important. I started out with State Farm. And one of my customers at State Farm had state minimums. And we talked to her. We told her, you know, I think your limits are a little bit low. Would you like to increase them? No, it's too expensive. I'm not going to do it. She went through a stop sign, hit a car salesman here in town, plowed through a stop sign, sent him to intensive care in McKinnon. Tremendous amount, 4 days intensive care, tremendous amount of medical cost. She did not have enough insurance. It was taken to court. The judge says, yeah, you're at fault. You went through the stop sign. That lady for 20 years has to pay $150 a month to this individual that she hit. She come back to us and said, you know what, Brad, I don't think I should take this whole blame. By the way, insurance agents are the third most sued profession behind doctors and lawyers. And it's insurance agents. So she comes to us and say, hey, you know what, I think you're to blame. You didn't sell me high enough insurance. We were able to go back into our database. I had the date, of the letter we mailed to her and said, we recommend this. She didn't accept it. So that just took the blame off me and put it on her. But she has to pay $150 a month for 20 years. Now what happens if it's a retired individual that went through the stop sign, hit someone, the judge, more than likely, if they don't have a lot of assets, the judge is going to say, you know what, you don't have employment, you're living on Social Security, you screwed up, no doubt about it, but we can't expect you to pay. Then the person that's hit, that's got the injury, is just out of luck. So, important, very important to know what your liability limits are. What do you think the average deer strike is? What do you think the average cost when you hit a deer?
About 5,000. I can say 2,500.
No, you're not too far off. Let's see, I got the number right. The average deer strike is $3,100. Every year, 1.6 million deer vehicle collisions happen. Total of 4.6 billion. It's hard, but whenever you see a deer or something in the road, what do? You swerve. Where a lot of the damage comes in is when you swerve, you go to the ditch, you roll, that's where you get a lot of your injuries. So believe it or not, it's against human nature, but the best thing to do is hit the deer. Within reason. I mean, if it's in the ditch, don't hit it. I mean, if it's on the road.
I gotta hit you. Get back here.
The average moose claim is $18,000. And that's usually up in Maine, and that's because they sit so high. So you have a lot more medical damage. Now you're not just hitting the moose, you're going underneath it and it's hitting your windshield. 1 in 5 people admit to texting while driving. They surveyed 2 different groups. They started out with 16 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 54-year-olds, 55 and older. Which of those 3 groups, which ones do you think admit to texting the most?
The young one?
Yeah, 25 to 50-year-olds. 41% of them admit to texting. The 16 to 24-year-olds, 31% admit to texting, and 5% of those 55 and older. Now the key word is admit. I'm not sure that the younger ones would admit that they're texting. But every day you see accidents in the paper. I shouldn't say every day, quite often, too often, about people texting, checking their phone, on the phone. There was just one in the paper again, just today. He was checking his phone, he hit another vehicle in Agawam school bus. It's a concern. I mean, that is a real concern to the insurance industry. What they're trying to figure out is how can companies or how can the government shut off your texting ability on a phone while you're in a vehicle? They're playing all these different things.